User of Reddit, what is an undeniably evil profession? Story 1. Vultures of grief. There are many professions that occupy a moral gray area, but some operate in a spectrum of darkness so complete that they can only be described as undeniably evil. For me, the absolute pinnacle of this is the professional psychic, especially any who dare to insert themselves into the orbit of a grieving family. They are not harmless entertainers or quirky spiritualists. They are vultures of grief, predators who have monetized the agony of others and built a business model on the desperation of the heartbroken. My conviction on this isn't just an abstract principle. It was cemented one afternoon during the most mundane of errands. I was in Target, pushing a squeaky cart under the sterile fluorescent lights, probably trying to decide between two brands of laundry detergent. It was a completely normal Tuesday. A woman I'd never seen before suddenly stepped in front of my cart, blocking my path. She was dressed in a caricature of what a mystical person looks like. Layers of shawls, oversized turquoise jewelry, and an intense, unblinking stare. She looked me up and down with a feigned air of deep concern and said, "You have to call me right away. I already know you need help." She held out a cheap-looking business card with a celestial design on it. "Here," she said, her voice a low, theatrical whisper. "Please don't wait to call." I just stared at her. I wasn't scared. I wasn't intrigued. I was disgusted. I knew exactly what she was doing. It was a cold read, a predatory fishing expedition. She didn't see a troubled aura around me. She saw a potential customer, another random person in a sea of people who might be going through a hard time, a breakup, a job loss, an illness, a death in the family. She was throwing out a wide, generic net of, "I know you need help," and hoping to snag someone, anyone, vulnerable enough to believe she had a special insight into their pain. I didn't take the card. The idea of someone using a place like Target as their personal hunting ground for the emotionally wounded struck me as profoundly, fundamentally evil. This personal disgust, I feel, is not unique or new. In fact, it connects me to one of the most famous skeptics in history, a man who built his career on illusion, but held the truth in the highest regard. The great magician, Harry Houdini. His passionate hatred for psychics wasn't born from professional rivalry. It was forged in a moment of his own deep, personal grief. Houdini was exceptionally close to his mother, Cecilia. When she died, he was devastated, consumed by a grief so profound that he desperately longed for one last connection, one final word. His friend, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes and, ironically, a fervent believer in spiritualism, genuinely wanted to help his friend. Doyle was convinced of the legitimacy of the spirit world and arranged a séance for Houdini with a medium who claimed she could channel the dead. You have to imagine the scene, a dark, quiet room. Houdini, the master of deception, willingly suspending his disbelief, his heart aching with the desperate hope of hearing from his beloved mother. Doyle is there, earnest and hopeful. The medium begins her performance, the lights dim, and she claims to have made contact with Cecilia's spirit. A message begins to come through, either by automatic writing or the medium's own voice. It is a message of love and reassurance, a spirit's comfort from beyond the grave. But as the message unfolded, Houdini's hope turned to ice-cold fury. The medium, channeling his mother, was communicating in perfect English. It was a fatal, amateur mistake. Houdini's mother was a Hungarian immigrant who spoke Yiddish and German, and her grasp of English was poor at best. She would never, under any circumstances, have chosen to communicate in English, in this life or the next. In that instant, Houdini saw the whole thing for the cheap, cruel trick it was. This charlatan, in her ignorance, had not channeled his mother. She had desecrated her memory, twisting his deepest love and grief into a parlor trick for a quick buck. That moment changed him. He spent a significant portion of his later career on a crusade, publicly exposing and debunking the very mediums and psychics he once hoped could offer him solace. He saw them for what they truly were, not messengers from another world, but parasites on this one. From a random woman in a Target aisle to a famous medium in a séance room a century ago, the hustle is the same. It is an industry built entirely on the exploitation of our most sacred vulnerabilities: love, loss, and hope. They circle the grieving like sharks, offering a fantasy of connection for a fee. That, to me, is an evil that no amount of mystical jargon or theatrical performance can ever disguise. Story 2. Content children. On the surface, it's one of the most wholesome genres on the internet. Family vlogging presents a curated dream of domestic bliss. Beautiful parents, adorable children, immaculate homes, and a life filled with laughter, exciting vacations, and a seemingly endless supply of brand new toys. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry built on a fantasy of the perfect family. But if you look past the bright colors and forced smiles, you'll find a dark and almost completely unregulated industry of child exploitation, where a child's privacy, emotional development, and entire life are packaged and sold for views. It is, in my opinion, a thoroughly and undeniably evil profession. The core of the issue is this: these children are professional entertainers. They are the unpaid, unconsenting stars of a 24/7 reality show where their parents are the producers, directors, and sole financial beneficiaries. A child actor on a Hollywood set is protected by stringent labor laws. There are limits on their working hours, requirements for on-set schooling, and laws like the Coogan Act that ensure a portion of their earnings is set aside in a protected trust fund. The children of family vloggers have none of these protections. Their home is their film set. Their parents are their bosses, and their entire childhood, from their first steps to their first heartbreak, is monetized content. While there are countless examples of this exploitation, from the mundane to the extreme, no case illustrates the profound evil of this industry more clearly than that of Micah and James Stauffer. The Stauffers were a moderately successful vlogging family who skyrocketed to fame by documenting their adoption journey. They chronicled in intimate detail their process of adopting a special needs child, Huxley, from China. They shared their fears, their hopes, and their faith, building a massive and devoted audience who saw them as selfless, inspirational heroes. Their channel exploded. The views, sponsorships, and ad revenue poured in. Huxley, the vulnerable toddler from halfway across the world, had become their brand. For 2 years, they featured him heavily in their content, profiting from his story and his disabilities. Then, one day, after the checks had been cashed and their online fame was secure, they uploaded a tearful video. In it, they explained that raising Huxley had been too hard, that his needs were too great, and that they had, in their own chilling words, rehomed him. They gave him away. Like a puppy that wasn't a good fit for the family, they placed this child, whom they had brought into their home and profited from, with a new, forever family. They used a vulnerable child as a stepping stone for fame and fortune, and when he was no longer convenient for their brand, they discarded him. It is one of the most grotesque betrayals I have ever witnessed. On the other end of the spectrum is the commercial behemoth known as Ryan's World. This isn't just a family blog, it's a global corporate empire built on the back of a single child. What started as a simple toy unboxing channel has metastasized into a brand that includes licensed video games, television shows, and an endless stream of merchandise, from branded toothbrushes to bed sheets. Ryan himself is no longer a child. He is a brand, a logo, a marketing tool used to sell products directly to other children. The evil here is more subtle but just as pervasive. Ryan's entire childhood has been a performance. Every joyful reaction to a new toy is an advertisement. His life is not his own. It's a means to an end for his parents' financial gain. My greatest concern, and the question that haunts me when I think of these children, is what happens next. What happens to Ryan when he is no longer a cute, marketable kid? What happens when he's a teenager who doesn't want to play with toys, whose every awkward phase has been broadcast to millions? Will he have access to the fortune he generated, or will he be cast aside when the brand is no longer profitable, left a deeply dysfunctional adult who realizes his entire life was just a job he was never allowed to quit? This is the insidious nature of the family vlogging industry. It's a profession that consumes a child's life from the inside out. It erases the line between home and work, between love and content, between a parent and a manager. These creators may wrap their work in the language of family and fun, but they are engaging in a modern, digital form of child labor. The psychological scars it leaves on these content children are something we are only just beginning to understand. Story 3. Protecting the company. Most employees operate under a dangerous illusion about the human resources department. They see the human part of the title and believe the department exists to help them, to serve as a neutral mediator, an advocate for their rights, and a safe harbor in times of workplace conflict. In a healthy organization, HR can sometimes be that. But after a brief, soul-crushing stint at a company I no longer even list on my resume, I learned the cold, hard truth that exists in many corporations. HR is not there to protect you. HR is there to protect the company, and the methods they use to do so can be undeniably evil. I've worked in HR for a while, for several different companies. Most were fairly standard. But one job was different. The culture was toxic from the top down, and I quickly learned that HR's primary function was not personnel management, It was risk mitigation, and when necessary, human disposal. My role was as an observer, not a participant in the worst of it. But what I witnessed was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting and psychological cruelty. Here's how it would work. A manager in some department would decide they wanted to get rid of an employee. The reason was never a legitimate, fireable offense. Maybe the employee was making too much money, and they wanted to hire someone younger and cheaper. Maybe there was a simple personality clash. Maybe the employee was just competent enough to make the manager feel insecure. The reason didn't matter. The decision was made, and the order would come down to HR. Find a way to make this person disappear, and make sure we can't get sued for it. This is where the evil began. The HR team would be tasked with building a retroactive case for termination. An employee who, by all objective metrics, was a perfectly fine performer would suddenly be placed under a microscope. Their entire employment history would be scoured for ammunition. A deadline missed 6 months ago, a minor disagreement with a colleague from last year, any single piece of negative feedback, no matter how old or irrelevant. These scraps were gathered and assembled into a file that would serve as the foundation for the coming character assassination. The next step was the most insidious. The targeted employee would be called into a formal meeting with their manager and an HR representative. They would walk in expecting a normal check-in and instead be ambushed. The manager, armed with the list of dredged-up infractions provided by HR, would paint a picture of severe underperformance. The employee would be told that their work was not up to standard, that they were letting the team down, and that their attitude was a problem. As the script I read once perfectly put it, the goal was to make them believe they're not doing the job correctly. It was pure, calculated gaslighting. I watched a colleague go into one of these meetings as a confident professional and come out looking pale and shattered, questioning their own competence and reality. This sham meeting would be documented as a first counseling session or a verbal warning, creating the first entry in a paper trail designed to justify a firing that had been decided upon weeks earlier. Once this seed of doubt was planted, the employee was on a fast track to the door. Their work was now scrutinized to an impossible degree. A minor typo in an email was a lack of attention to detail. Asking for clarification on a project was an inability to work independently. Their confidence destroyed, their every move watched. They would inevitably make small mistakes, which were then eagerly documented by the manager and HR as proof of their ongoing performance issues. Within a month or two, they'd be called back into that same office and terminated for cause, with HR presenting a neat little file full of manufactured evidence to protect the company from any legal recourse. A good person's career would be derailed, their professional reputation damaged, and their mental health shredded. Also, a manager could get their way or the company could save a few dollars. I didn't last long there. I couldn't be a part of a system that weaponized its resources against its own people. That is the evil of this profession in the wrong hands. It's a quiet, bureaucratic evil that operates in well-lit conference rooms and hides behind corporate jargon. It preys on the fundamental trust an employee has in their employer. In a place like that, HR professionals aren't a resource for humans. They are the company's internal affairs division, its secret police, and sometimes its executioners. Story 4. The debt trap. Some professions are evil because they are violent, others because they are deceitful. But there is a special, insidious category of evil for professions that disguise their predation as an act of charity. They set a trap, bait it with the promise of help, and then bleed their victims dry with a friendly smile. At the top of this list is the payday loan provider. Their entire business model is a masterpiece of financial and psychological manipulation. And the most disturbing part is that they often convince their own employees that they are doing God's work. My personal insight into this world comes from my father-in-law. He's a good man, kind-hearted, and genuinely well-intentioned. For the last few years, he's been working as a regular employee at one of those bright, cheerful-looking, fast-cash storefronts in a low-income neighborhood. And to my unending frustration, he honestly, truly believes he is helping people. I've tried to have this conversation with him many times, but it always ends at the same impasse. I'll bring up the predatory interest rates, the cycle of debt, the way the industry targets the vulnerable. He'll just shake his head and tell me a story from his day. He'll talk about the single mother who came in, frantic because her kid needed medicine she couldn't afford. He'll describe the construction worker whose truck broke down and needed a few $100s to fix it so he could get to his job on Monday. I saw the relief on their faces, he'll say with genuine pride. They walked in with the weight of the world on their shoulders, and I was able to help them. They got the money they needed to buy food for their kids. In his mind, he is a small-town hero, a lifeline for his community. He sees the transaction in a vacuum. A person needs help, and he provides it. He cannot or will not see the poison hidden within the cure he's offering. The most obvious flaw in his logic, which I've pointed out to him repeatedly, is the number of recurring customers. The lobby of his store is filled with the same faces, week after week. If his service was truly a one-time emergency fix, a way to bridge a temporary gap, then why are people constantly coming back? The truth, which he refuses to see, is that the business is not designed to solve a problem. It is designed to create a permanent dependency. The trap is in the math. These are not traditional loans. A small, seemingly manageable loan of a few $100s comes with fees and interest rates that, when calculated annually, can soar into the triple digits, 300%, 400%, 500%. The terms are structured so that if the loan isn't paid back in full by the very next paycheck, which is nearly impossible for someone already in a financial crisis, it rolls over, accumulating more fees and more interest. A $300 loan for medicine quickly becomes a $600 debt, then a $1,000 debt. The customer is now forced to take out another payday loan just to pay off the interest on the first one. This is the debt trap. It's a financial treadmill that you can never get off of. The sad truth is that my father-in-law is uniquely unqualified to see this reality because he is himself terrible with money. When my wife and I first got married, he proudly told me he had $25,000 saved for his retirement and thought he'd be able to stop working in a few years. His fundamental misunderstanding of how money works makes him the perfect employee for this kind of company. He can't see the predatory nature of the system because he doesn't grasp the numbers. He only sees the smiling, grateful faces of the people he thinks he's saving. That's the true, undeniable evil of the payday loan industry. It's not just the predatory math. It's the brilliant, cynical way it cloaks its financial vampirism in the language of community service. It uses good-hearted, financially illiterate people like my father-in-law as its friendly front men. He is the smiling face that welcomes desperate people into a system designed to ensure they stay desperate forever. He goes home every night feeling like he made a difference, while the company he works for systematically extracts the remaining wealth from the poorest members of his community, one crushing interest payment at a time. Story 5. The Pirates of the Parking Lot. There is a specific and vicious type of evil reserved for professions that make their money by kicking people who are already down. It's an evil that thrives in the margins, in the places where a single unexpected expense can trigger a catastrophic financial collapse. I'm talking about the predatory towers, the pirates of the parking lot, and for a year, I had a front row seat to their particularly nasty brand of organized theft. My hatred for them still boils to this day, and I will die on the hill that their business is undeniably evil. I used to live in a large, sprawling apartment complex that was home to a mix of students, young families, and working-class people just trying to make ends meet. It was the kind of place where most residents were living paycheck to paycheck. An unexpected $500 bill wasn't an inconvenience. It was a potential eviction notice. And circling our parking lot day and night was the tow truck from a local company that had a contract with the complex. They were sharks in a swimming pool, full of people who were already barely treading water. Their operation was not about maintaining parking order. It was a hunt. They would troll the lots at all hours, driving slowly, their spotlights sweeping across rows of cars, looking for any possible infraction. A tire an inch over the white line a visitor pass that had slipped from the dashboard, a registration sticker that was peeling at the corner. Any tiny excuse was enough for them to hook up a car and drag it away to their impound lot, which was essentially a ransom yard. They knew exactly who they were targeting, people who couldn't afford to fight back, people for whom a $500 impound and towing fee was a devastating, often insurmountable blow. They weren't enforcing rules. They were stealing cars from the poor. My personal war with them began the day I brought home a new-to-me car. It was a Beta, but it ran perfectly, and the paperwork was all in order. Its only crime was that it was ugly, covered in mismatched shades of primer and Bondo. To any nosy neighbor or, as it turned out, predatory tow truck driver, it might have looked abandoned. I had just gotten it home when, through my window, I saw the tow truck backing up to it, the hook and chains rattling. A jolt of pure adrenaline and rage shot through me. I sprinted out of my apartment yelling. The driver, a large man with a completely apathetic expression, was already preparing to hoist my car's front wheels. I confronted him, my voice shaking with anger, and he just gestured dismissively at my car's ugly paint job. To him, that was justification enough. It took me a full 10 minutes of frantic searching for my just-signed title and registration, shoving the paperwork in his face to get him to back off. I had saved my car only because I was in the right place at the right time. I couldn't stop thinking about how many of my neighbors, who were at their jobs or asleep in their beds, hadn't been so lucky. That close call solidified my boiling hatred into a quiet mission of revenge. I couldn't stop them from towing cars, but I could make their lives a little more difficult and a little more expensive. Their symbols of power in our complex were the dozens of small aluminum signs they had posted on every light pole, warning of the parking regulations and displaying their phone number. I decided those signs had to go. So late one night, armed with a wrench, I went on a hunt of my own. I unbolted the first sign from its post and carried it back to my apartment like a conquered flag. A few days later, they replaced it. A few nights after that, I stole the replacement. It became a game. Every time they put up a new sign, I would take it down. In a delicious twist of irony, my job at the time was in a sign-making shop. I knew exactly how much those custom aluminum signs cost to manufacture and install. I took great satisfaction in knowing I was personally chipping away at their profits, one stolen sign at a time. I don't live there anymore, but in my garage, I still have 3 of those signs hanging on the wall as trophies. They are a monument to my small, one-man war against a truly scummy profession. Predatory towing is evil because its business model requires it to be. It relies on the misery of others. The drivers are bounty hunters, the dispatchers are extortionists, and the owners are profiting from a system designed to punish people for being poor. And I will forever be proud of my little collection of stolen metal.